Hi, everyone. I'm Miriam, and I will be your host for today's Q&A. I just want to welcome everyone to the Greenhouse Q&A live webinar. This is our August edition. We will be joined by greenhouse experts Marc, Plinke, and Josh Holleb, and co-host Haley Liddell. Before we get started, I just want to do some brief introductions, and then we can jump right into the questions. So just in case anyone here doesn't know already, Ceres Greenhouse Solutions is a company devoted to designing and engineering energy-efficient growing systems. Ceres recognizes that beyond providing a well-designed facility, integrating appropriate technology and focused data, as well as smart partnerships, it is essential to creating greenhouse facilities that both consider the environment and make financial sense. Marc Plinke is the founder and chief innovation officer for Ceres. He's an innovator who started his career as a chemical and process engineer working for Gore Technologies. When he landed in Boulder, Colorado, he retrofitted his family's 1950s ranch house into a beyond net zero energy home. That experience led him into his second career in greenhouse building design. He has spent the past decade applying his engineering mindset and expertise to building better and more energy efficient greenhouses. After helping build a state-of-the-art commercial greenhouse funded by the Colorado Department of Agriculture, Marc started Ceres with the intention of enabling people to grow their own food sustainably and year-round. Marc's passion is his family and his belief in leaving the world a better place for his children. Josh Holleb is a systems integration specialist. Since starting at Ceres 13 years ago, Josh has created the cannabis division, helped design the Ceres Sun Chamber, and developed the Vesta Kit House, bringing more than a decade of experience in design, construction, and cultivation. Josh approaches his job with an interdisciplinary understanding of systems, architectural design, and problem solving. His goal is to create a whole systems approach to both greenhouse design and environmental controls, resulting in the most efficient systems and highest quality product. We are also joined, as mentioned before, by Haley Liddell, who is our content marketing manager. Haley will be interrupting the Q&A with questions that are being asked and will be helping facilitate hosting. For some of you might have been here last month when we did Q&A. We wanted to change it up a little bit and make this month a little bit more casual. We got a lot of great questions before. We didn't get to them all. We did want to address those questions in this Q&A, so we're going to go ahead and do that. But because we have fewer questions, we are going to just allow for interruptions with questions from the audience, from you guys. So if you do have a question at any point in time, please put it in the Q&A, and Haley or I will interrupt with the question. We just ask that it be somewhat pertinent to the topics that we are discussing today, or to the questions that are being answered. And those questions are going to be, first, we'll go over some questions about greenhouse sizing, then the value proposition or ROI of the greenhouse, energy production, sustainability, followed by growth systems. That is about everything. Before we just get started, I just have to read a small disclaimer that this podcast is for informational purposes only, and no answer provided here should be considered legal advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this webinar. This webinar is not intended to replace professional advice, and the views expressed in this webinar may not be those of the host or the management of Ceres Greenhouse Solutions LLC per se. They are the views of the panelists who work for Ceres. So with that, I will jump right into the first question, which is going to be related to greenhouse sizing. And this question is going to go to Josh. And the question is, how do you determine what size is right for your growing purposes?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back if you joined us for the first one. This question most often when we see it is a residential based question. People are trying to feed their families, and they're always curious about how to pick a size that could most appropriately feed a group of people. And there's some common knowledge out there, and I'm not actually sure where it comes from, but it is kind of a standard that we roll with, which is 1 to 200 square feet per person that you're trying to feed. And that's a good general baseline to start from, I think. So a family of 4 might want 800 square feet to start with. Um, Obviously, if you go bigger, you're going to be more likely to be able to feed your family. It also almost never is going to purely feed your family unless you're truly going deep with the gardening. But it can largely supplement a person or a family's diet. And in a Ceres greenhouse, that can be year round, which is pretty fun. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which I think I'm doing. Yes, okay. And I just want to show a few pictures. This is a 12-foot deep by basically 30-foot long greenhouse. But what I really want to show here is that they're using vertical space. And so when we talk about how much can I grow in a greenhouse, it really depends on what you're growing, how you're growing, and really how good you are at actually growing it. And so in this image, they are vertical growing the whole back row of the greenhouse, and it creates a lot more space to produce food. Versus, hold on, a photo like this, I'm going to come back to for another reason later, where it's all on one plane, and what you see is what you get. Neither is right or wrong. This is a commercial greenhouse, and this makes perfect sense for this application. Here's another, this is a commercial greenhouse as well, but they're using some vertical space or some horizontal space, sorry, and then a lot of vertical space as well. So it really depends on what you're growing. A lot of plants like full sun. Those can be up high in the overstory, almost like trees in a forest. A lot of plants are okay with shade. They can be below them. Leafy greens are one of them where they need light, but not so much light. So it really just depends on how you're growing and what you're growing. And how well you do it, which will dictate how much food you can crank out of a greenhouse. Oftentimes, the other aspect to think about is cost of a greenhouse. Greenhouses are not cheap. And so it'd be easy to say, well, let's just build 2,000 square feet of greenhouse, then we'll definitely grow enough food for ourselves. But there's a cost associated with that. And there's also an amount of work associated with that. 2,000 square feet of greenhouse is a lot more work than 1,000 square feet of greenhouse. It might be twice as much, might be more than twice as much. And so it also has to do with how much time you can commit to taking care of your greenhouse. Marc, you have any thoughts on that?
I think you kept summarizing that quite well for the residential concerns. Are you going to talk a little bit about the commercial ones as well?
I will. I think that's a separate inquiry, and we'll get to that.
It
here
is
shortly.
actually our next question. So if you're ready for that, Josh, we
Oh
separate.
yeah, we do have one question that
Yes,
from
Haley.
the attendees. It is tad unrelated, but also here it is. What is the important climate elements that you need to control inside a glass greenhouse in a Mediterranean climate country, and which sensors and devices we need in which control hubs?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you're trying to grow. But Mediterranean climate to me means this is a kind of easy thing, hopefully, but it's kind of the same as far as sensing in any greenhouse, regardless of where you are. In all our greenhouses, it was Haley, just to make sure I'm answering that right, it's what sensing do we need? What do we need to think about?
Yeah, sensors and devices, and to which control hubs and climate elements.
Yeah, so I mean, we're always reading temperature and relative humidity in the greenhouse. It's really helpful. We have a quite smart controller. There's plenty of cheap controllers out there that can do some things like turn on exhaust fans and turn off exhaust fans and things like that. But our controller, or a smarter controller, we also often recommend an external weather station. We want to know what outside weather is, because if it's high humidity outside or raining, we might not want to pull that air through if we're trying to reduce the humidity inside the greenhouse or something like that. If it's ice in a Mediterranean climate, it's not going to be that cold. But if it's colder than you want it to be in your greenhouse, you might not want to use an exhaust fan or use an exhaust fan at full speed. Some of our fans are EC controlled, which means we can adjust how fast they're spinning. So we might just want to run one a little bit as opposed to a lot. We also often use lighting sensors, so PAR sensors. If you have supplemental lighting in the greenhouse, they can dim the lights up or down to hit desired set points that you need. And then there's other options like soil temp sensing. You can get into leaf temp, but that's more complicated. What am I missing, Marc?
I think the integration of the light, you mentioned about that, but I think in a Mediterranean climate, you're looking generally at plants that are getting quite a lot of light. And so controlling the light is very important, both in the sensors that you have, and then the way that you want to control your greenhouse to optimize for the light that you can get, including if you want to grow in the winter in most places of the US, you would probably want some artificial lights, but that's similar to what you already said.
Okay, hopefully that was helpful. And then Miriam, do you want to restate the next question and I can dive into that?
So there were two similar questions related to sizing. One of them, we decided to kind of drop in the residential bucket, and the other one is potentially more related to a value proposition of the ROI of the greenhouse. And that question is, how can I make sure that a Ceres greenhouse will be a profitable venture for me?
Right. And so there's my thoughts go in two directions. The question was make sure, and I think it's really important to focus on that. So in this greenhouse, this is a 5-acre organic farm in Wisconsin. And I tend to visit her every summer. And so I was just there a month ago. And I asked her, because again, the investment is a significant, the greenhouse is a significant investment in infrastructure on her farm. And she actually makes a monthly payment, like a mortgage payment, to pay for this project. And I said to her, how do you quantify the value of this? Because this is not a system. She has created an ecosystem, but this isn't a purchase system for commercial growing. This came out of her mind and unfolded in the greenhouse. She's growing tomatoes, cucumbers, celery. She does ginger, lemongrass, all kinds of things. And she has a CSA, and some of her clients are some of the nicer restaurants around the Madison area. And she said that regardless of the money that this greenhouse brings in, because she can start her starts so early in the season, her fields are healthier and more robust when outside growing starts, which gives her a leg up on other outdoor field farmers. And she grows lettuce all winter with no heat, just the GAT system, and no supplemental lighting, as you'll see. And she's able to supply restaurants with lettuce all winter, which is both a revenue stream and for her an amazing way to market what she does. The restaurants are talking about her. Her farm name is on the menu. So that's not quantifiable, but that's one way. The other way we do this, and this is for someone who's purely looking to make money and wants to like ensure that they can. And again, this is farming, so anything can happen at any moment. But these farms are designed conceptually before any greenhouse or system is ever built inside, like before the building's built or before the system is installed. We know how many plant sites are in this facility. We know how much you're going to be harvesting every week. And so here we can do math. And so what we've done with the aquaponics source is we go through this and we look at size of the greenhouse, and then we do an estimate of what's going to produce. And so I just did some math, and I'm using the high-end numbers, the higher-end numbers. And I picked $3 a head, which is, I think, on the lower end of things. We see people who are selling for $3.50 wholesale. We see people who sell probably up to $5 a head. direct to consumer. But math like this works out to $3,300 a week or $160,000 a year in lettuce alone, not taking into account the fish or the tomatoes. And we do this for all the sizes. So you can get a quote from us and from our partner here, Aquaponics Source, on what the building is going to cost and what the system is going to cost. And you can get an estimate for what the yield is going to be. That's going to be fairly accurate because we understand what the greenhouse is doing and how it's going to hold the climate, what it's going to take to maintain heat in the winter, et cetera. And the Aquaponics Source knows how much it's going to produce if we maintain a minimum set point of 65 or whatever it is that we're shooting for. So this is a cool way to go into a farming project with a fairly to really good idea of what your output's going to be. On bigger systems or other systems, those are aquaponics. This is a gutter-based NFT system. We can do the same thing. So depending on size of plant, this is 13 harvests per year, 17 harvests per year, 26 harvests per year. It's really plant size, how big it is when you're harvesting. This is quantity of plants per week. And so again, we can figure out weekly revenue numbers. And then on an even large, this is a single 3,000 square foot greenhouse. And then this is a significantly larger greenhouse where we're harvesting 13,600 head of lettuce a day. And so these numbers can actually get quite large, and something like lettuce can really produce a good amount of revenue. And for most people who go through the process and are doing the math, these farms make all kinds of sense financially. And this is a really nice way to get a project started, is to have done the math and know that you're in pretty good shape to be cash positive, off the bat and pay for it after a few years.
Josh, can I ask you a question shortly?
I'm not sure that's in the rules, Mark.
Okay, I'll try it anyway. So
Okay.
You talked about the water-based systems that are easy to estimate in terms of the yields, because there's a lot of experience about that. And we'll talk about energy efficiency later, but how about for people that want to grow in soil? That's harder, right?
It's a lot harder, because I have to do the math as opposed to someone else doing the math for me, but it's doable. We know, like, I'm going to pick a radish or something, right? A radish has a 26-day till harvest time. And so we can do the math and we can figure out how many radishes you could grow in a year. Lettuce, the same thing. Almost every plant, you look on the back of a seed packet, it tells you time to maturity. It tells you spacing, seed spacing, time to maturity. It doesn't tell you yield. I couldn't tell you what that radish is going to weigh when you harvest it, but after you do it once or twice, you have a pretty good idea. So it's very doable, but it's not simple math like 13,000 head of lettuce a day and they're $3 a head all day long. And so the math is more complicated, but it's possible to estimate it.
So if you were, I'm going to ask a question. So if you were to do this and you're starting a new greenhouse, you already know growing, what kind of grow system would you think would be a good start with? If you want to have a relatively safe start in the growing world and you're not necessarily already a full-fledged farmer who knows everything already.
And what's my goal? To make money, or to, if my goal is to have a profitable business and I'm nervous about this, I'm probably starting with hydroponic lettuce coming out of one of these systems because it's a little bit more of a given. And I think I would need to do that for a while to get comfortable. And then maybe I'd mix it up after a few years or something. But if I'm going to spend 100 grand, 200 grand on something, I need to know it's going to work for me in the beginning. And then I will start playing with it a few years down the road. Is that too boring?
Nah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
And are there some experts that help you figure out how to grow successfully?
I mean, we have our partners, especially if you're purchasing a system, really know what to do. And so they're there, we're there to support, they're there to support, all of which I think is really helpful for a new venture. Yeah, and then I think over time I maybe start reducing some of the purchase system and start encroaching with experimentation, more soil growing, tomatoes to the ceiling along the north wall that don't get in the way of my lettuce operation, and see where that goes.
And I just want to add on to this to make sure that we're being very clear here that a soil-based system isn't more challenging. It's just more challenging to calculate.
No, in the soil is actually more forgiving. If the power goes out, your plants don't all die, which is a nice thing. But how much yield are my in-soil tomato plants going to generate weekly? I don't have the first idea until I start doing it and learning. And I'm not sure anyone's going to tell me. There are water-based tomato systems as well as cucumber systems where there are estimates out there. Strawberries, we just had a meeting late last week about strawberries. The numbers are out there. And so you need to pick what your market needs, do the research, and then hopefully that makes you more comfortable as you move into your commercial venture in the greenhouse.
So that opens up a nice transition for us into the world of strawberries. And I believe we wanted to tackle this question next, using hydroponic strawberries as an example.
Yeah.
They're a general minimum size per crop, square feet per meter for a commercial operation to profit.
Yeah. It's, even though it seems like it shouldn't be, it has been for me harder to find information on commercial strawberry production, whereas lettuce, it's readily available. And Marc and I were in a conversation last week with a very smart person who's very good at what they do, both in greenhouse space and it sounds like in working with strawberries. To the point where he said, we now know how to, with hydroponic feeding and temperature ranges, we can reduce runners in strawberries. Strawberries want to kick out a runner and start a new plant, but that's a bit of wasted energy if you're really trying to harvest the fruit. So we can control runner growth, all these things I've actually never even heard of before. And he said that, what do you say, under an acre, it's not a money-making venture with strawberries. And then he wrote us back and he said, let's start talking about 5 acres. And so, I think he's like, maybe we can make some money on 5 acres. But he did say that he thinks an acre is where it starts. That's 45,000 square feet of greenhouse space.
I wanted to maybe show Jim. So the person that we talked with who was very generous to provide us some information is Jim Hewitt, who is a friend of mine and has also a greenhouse company. They build very beautiful conservatories, really. And so they're called Conservatory Craftsmen in Minnesota. And so lovely people. They are trying to evaluate this strawberry or tackle the strawberry problem. One of the first things they did, which I liked a lot, is they started in a hoop house, very, very simple, to just grow strawberries to see how they're doing and how good they are, and then tested what their market is like. And they were amazing in growing. And here you can see they used roof gutters that didn't go to fancy anything. They just had a gutter person come, made those gutters for them, and they set that system up themselves. And they wanted to learn how to do this. And I think that's a great way to start. He has a lot of experience, happy to talk to anybody about it. I think we can give a recommendation to reach out to Jim. And so he is thinking about upgrading, and I think he has enough knowledge to know that he can make this succeed, which is really fun. And there is another good strawberry group that does a lot of work at the University of Ohio State. Ceres Kubota, it's Kubo, I think. Kubota. And she does a lot of strawberry, etc. research. There's a lot of information can be gotten from them as well.
Great. Haley, are there any questions related to any of the topics that we've discussed in the last two questions, or should we wait for some of those questions, push some of those?
Yeah, we do have 3 questions, but they are a tad unrelated. So I think that we should just leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end of this so we could go over these questions, because they are really good questions, but they're a tad off topic.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question that we had on our document, and that is, what are the energy savings possible with a Ceres greenhouse compared to conventional greenhouses? And this one is for Marc.
Yeah. So thank you for that question. I do think the biggest difference that you already probably realized looking at our greenhouses is that they're not all glass or glazed, because the glazing area is really not very good for insulation purposes. So in any places where it gets cold in the winter, the first thing you can do to increase your greenhouse energy efficiency is insulate. Insulation is cheap compared to any mechanical mean. It's passive, it's always there. It protects you when it's cold, and it protects you when it's really hot, like in Saudi Arabia, etc. So first thing is you make things insulate. And in our greenhouses, because of the way they're built, east to west, we can insulate 70% of the whole greenhouse surface, and not let any of the cold air go out. So the energy efficiency of our greenhouses compared to a standard greenhouse is 75% and more. So in other words, you're needing maybe 25% of the energy just as the structure. When you add the GAT system to it, that means the ground to air heat transfer system that takes the heat that you have extra in the summer, put it in the ground, use that as storage, and then use that in the night to get that out, to get you to be close to 50 degrees, if that's what you're looking for. Your Ceres greenhouse can be 90% as efficient as something else, meaning there's only 10% energy left. But as always, comparisons depend on what you're comparing to. Now, if you start putting lights into the greenhouse because in the winter you just don't have enough light, then the absolute energy savings of a Ceres versus another greenhouse is still the same, but the relative amount goes down, of course, right? So if you're using the same amount of light in a Ceres greenhouse and you do in another, then that needs to be added and your fractions get off. But before we go into the fraction calculations, which I'd love to do, let's not go there and just say, depending on the pieces of equipment that you want to install, the efficiency to another greenhouse goes up and down. It also, the more equipment you're putting in, the better your yields will be, the better your fruits, your vegetables will look. And so there's always the option of trying to be as energy efficient as you can be. And then you have to figure out, okay, how much do I want to, how much money do I have in the first place? And what is my payback period? Am I looking at a payback in 2 years, in 5 years, in 7 years, in 10 years? Is this the essential part of what I'm selling? And so then the payback is really something altogether different. And so to get to this, and just to say, we did a life cycle analysis where we looked at, and I can show this here, where we looked at how much energy every aspect of a greenhouse takes. And then we compared it to how much energy does it take to actually run the greenhouse. And what we found, by hands down, that if you want to be close to net zero, you want to be doing the least to influence your climate, getting the climate inside the greenhouse right, meaning the heating and the cooling, is easily the biggest part of the energy that you are spending, especially when you compare it to the insulated panels, the steel, everything else. So when you look on this particular graph, what you can see is that, for example, the plastic roofing takes 15% of the energy to produce, or the CO2 that you're emitting, compared 15 out of 100 is just for the polycarbonate. The biggest thing, can you think, not surprisingly, is the metal frame. That's 34% of the energy of that greenhouse. And other things, insulation, rebar, the GAT system is very, very small. So this is very easy. The parts are not making any difference in our CO2 balance of the earth, but the heating that they provide is amazing. The concrete foundation, 11%, is a big number. And the wall panels are 22%. So that gives you an idea. We have this paper written someplace, so that can be shared. And what you can see from here is that more important than most important is the energy cost that it takes to heat and cool the building. That's where your energy goes in, not so much in the materials that it needed to actually build the facility. Was that too much? Was I lecturing?
That's
I
great.
actually have a quick question interjection here. There is like a GAT question. It's sort of related, and it does refer to the Wisconsin farm. From Deborah, she asks, based on what you said about the Wisconsin farm, it sounds like a GAT system would work well to heat a large size greenhouse in Seattle area without an external heat source. Am I correct?
It's a great question. The most important thing that we would need to know is, what are you growing, and how warm an environment does that plant need to do the thing you want to do? So in Wisconsin, she could be growing a lot more lettuce if she heated her greenhouse to 65 degrees using like a gas heater. Her inputs cost would be higher, but her output would also be higher. And it'd be, often it's worth analyzing, is that extra money spent worth the potential yield or revenue that it creates? Her mindset is slightly different. She uses the GAT system to basically keep her around 50 degrees for most of the winter. She said if she gets, the hot new word is a polar vortex, I think is what we call it these days, cold weather. If she has 3 days in the negative 10s or 20s, she will turn on her heater. But other than that, she doesn't. And she grows greens slowly. So a greenhouse that doesn't freeze can maintain greens for the most part. It's called maintaining. So a lot of people will grow up a bunch of things in the fall, greens, and then the greenhouse or hoop house will hold them all winter. They're still alive, but they're not growing much. She's able to grow greens at 50 degrees all winter, albeit slower than they would grow in ideal conditions. And so it just matters what you're growing and what that minimum set point is. The GAT is not an active heater. It's not using electricity or gas to create heat. It's using electricity to move air. And so it just depends what your soil temps are, which kind of dictate what the GAT can do.
Thanks, Josh. Before we move on from questions related to ROI and value proposition, there was also a question posted in the chat. And I think we sort of covered this, but if you don't mind just seeing if there's anything you have to say, Josh or Mark, it's how do you help your clients in predicting future revenues, making forecasts to estimate the profitability of the greenhouse you are going to build for your client? Many investors are new to the industry and will invest if it's going to be a profitable venture.
Yep. So I'll share again, and we can just go back to, these are a little bit prettier, so I'll use one of these. But if we're looking at this 30 by 98, almost 3,000 square footer. You're seeing my screen before I keep going and no one knows what I'm talking about? Okay. Here's your weekly estimate of lettuce harvested. And so we give you a greenhouse proposal. So you know the cost of the greenhouse. We can estimate, or you can talk to a local contractor to understand what the cost to build the greenhouse will be. We get you a quote for this growing system. So those are your money out. That's what you're spending. And then based on how the system lays out, we get an estimate of yield. You need to know your local market and know what each of these heads are worth and how you're going to move them. That's a big part of it, whether it's wholesale or farmer's market or whatever it is. And that will dictate a price per head for you. And, you know, it's nice to always be conservative just in case. But then you can build a business plan just like that. It's actually one of the simpler business plans to build. And you can say, okay, the greenhouse is going to cost me, you know, whatever, I'm going to make up some numbers, $200,000 to build, buy and build. And it's going to generate $160,000 a year in greens alone revenue. And I need to pay a few farmers or people to help me. And there's packaging, whatever else. And, you know, in 2 or 3 years, you can potentially pay off your investment or something. And you know, if the math works, investors should like that. But again, that's not on us to tell you. It's on you to have that conversation with your investors and see if that is enticing enough for them to give you their money.
Josh, can you, I mean, there are a few people that we may be able to let people talk with, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can always reach out to us to get the ball rolling. We work with, this group is called the Aquaponics Source. They're a Colorado-based aquaponics company that we've worked with a lot in the past, and so we know quite well how those systems work in our greenhouses. And we have several other growing system suppliers that we work with that, depending on crop or yield or growing style, we can direct people who are curious about this too.
All right, so moving into money that's available outside of your own, what rebates or incentives are available to help defer or reduce the cost of an efficient greenhouse with higher upfront costs? And we will have Marc start this one off.
Share this. We had a blog on this. I think that's here. Where is it? Here. When you type in Ceres greenhouses rebates, you come to this page, and it talks about funding from utilities across North America, written by a friend of ours, Gretchen Schimmelfennig. We can make those connections.
You can also post this. We can post a link for this.
Yeah. Here are a few parts. Oops, now I'm getting, hold on. Something popping up. Okay, so here you can get a good list of energy efficiency rebate parts, depending on what your greenhouse looks like and what it is equipped with. There could be air conditioning pieces on it, which is the eco pack. There can be renewable energy systems, wind turbines and solar panels. Super good rebates or grants available that pay most of your money for these investments if you have a commercial farm. The controller actually is super important because it optimizes the greenhouse conditions and avoids peaks both in temperature and humidity, which is not good for the plants, but reduces the energy use. For those, there are ways to ask for rebates. Energy efficient lighting is an obvious one. I think in most of these things, you need to be a commercial farm. I don't think that works on residential greenhouses. energy efficiency of the building itself. So there's the passive solar design concept. They will go into these energy analyses that expert like Gretchen do for you, if that's what you want to do. And of course, anywhere in the West, water conservation is a big issue. So if we can use less water, there may be incentives as well to help farms be more sustainable. And so those are probably good places for you to look and get a first idea. You can reach out to us or to Gretchen or similar people. They will be happy to walk you through. We have many consultants that do grant writing and support. And so we're happy to help make connections.
And I think it's worthwhile to mention that when we're designing a greenhouse and we almost always have rebates or incentives in mind, because we get them with our design and the things that we focus on. Many of the groups who help find where the rebates are and help clients get the rebates, it's at no cost to the client. They usually charge a percentage of the money given back, the rebate or the incentive. And so oftentimes there's no upfront fee or a small upfront fee to initiate or engage the services. And then once it's done, a percentage of the money recouped is the payment for the engineers who are helping you get those rebates or incentives. Which makes it easier when you don't know what you're going to get. It's easy to not pay for it until you're getting money back.
All right, thanks, guys. Let's talk about energy production and
Hey,
sustainability.
could I just say one more thing, because we just saw this happen? We have a commercial farm here in Boulder, and this, this is with Excel Energy. I don't know if it's Excel Energy everywhere or in Colorado, but it's just an example. They had high pressure sodium lights that they were using. They're growing year round in their greenhouse. Excel Energy, this is earlier this year, end of last year, they replaced all of their lights with high performance LEDs. They're the LEDs that we put into our most high performing greenhouses, same brand, everything. And I think that Excel Energy almost paid for the entire swap. It cost them next to no money. And so there are sometimes different incentives if you're building from scratch versus a retrofit. And sometimes the retrofit is even more enticing. And so if you already have a farm and you're using some older technology lighting, it's probably worthwhile to reach out to your utility to see if they have high efficiency rebates for swapping out older technology.
I think one little thing we do know that some states, Georgia being one of them, is actually paying or giving farmers money to build greenhouses to increase their crop security, because there are so many catastrophic losses, weather related, that the Department of Agriculture is basically trying to help farmers to secure some income by financing greenhouses. So you may want to look at that as well.
Okay, so just because of time, I'm gonna lump two of our questions together that are related to solar panels. And those questions are, can your head houses be used for solar panels to generate power for the greenhouses and processing in the head house? And then if we have time, if you'd like to just add in, Josh and Mark, does Ceres have any experience with using light transmitting solar panels in the roof of a greenhouse? So let's just talk about solar panels in general.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen again. That was a question.
Yes, you are.
Great. So this is just this is our Vesta Kit house. But I just wanted to show that obviously our greenhouses are oriented towards the south. A goal of a greenhouse is to let sunlight into a building. solar panels are inherently not good for that. They want the same orientation, but they traditionally don't let light through them. They try and absorb as much light as they can to create power. What we do is two things. In this drawing, we've created solid roof, insulated roof spaces, both for shading, but also to hold solar panels. So we would never put a solar panel here on the glazing because that's where we want sunlight to come in. But we do design spaces for solar panels. In this design, which this is a better picture, and sorry if this is a bit of a funky perspective, but this is the south face of the greenhouse. We have a section of insulated roof at the top of the greenhouse, so oriented south, but it creates some shade on the north wall and also gives room for solar panels. It's an ideal placement for solar panels. What we're learning now is that with the cost of solar panels coming down and the efficiency of modern solar panels going up, putting solar panels on a north-facing roof is, depending on location, usually worthwhile. Now, this doesn't work so well in off-grid situations where you need to be generating power all the time to replenish your batteries. These north-facing panels in the winter aren't going to do very much. But if you're a grid-tied property and you're selling all your power back to the grid anyways, the however many, Mark, you can say, but 6 months a year or 8 months a year that these are doing something, it's worthwhile. And so that's something to note. As far as our head houses are concerned, a head house is an indoor building, fully insulated with a regular insulated roof, opaque. We design them specifically for clients' needs. And so if we know that solar is going on it, there could be a huge south-facing solid roof for solar panels. It's a great spot to place solar panels on a greenhouse facility. Mark, do you want to talk some about modern glazing?
If I kick you
technologies?
out,
I can.
So they have been for a while, and there are more and more facilities now that you can actually get light transmitting solar panels. So this is a PV panel, so it makes electricity. You can see it here on top of a building that otherwise would be a normal greenhouse. And we have built this even in a trailer, so for this trailer to basically make the energy that it needs. These panels are colored that way so that you transform all the important radiation that the plants need, and the rest you use to make your electricity. And these panels work quite well. On the inside, it looks a little pink, but otherwise they work well. They are just one option. There are now many more such systems available and much more sophisticated. We're working on that with some big manufacturers. So that's happening. At the same time, really, I think it's important to know that, you know, you can put solar panels together with PV and water, which means you're actually heating the water that goes by. So you make warm water and you make electricity. So they're not light transmitting to the plants. They're just using that energy. And I think we talked about that last time. I think a company that does that is called Power Panel. So there are other ways to make energy out of the sun. Those are just two lovely ones. You can also combine a solar thermal, meaning a hot water system, to heat your soil. And that too can be done. And we have even patented that. And so this is all available, and we can help you design these systems.
Yeah, and I think it is a question just came in, and I was going to speak to it. While there's a lot of exciting new technology happening with greenhouse glazings and potentially integrating photovoltaics into the glazing. At this point, and maybe always, but at least at this point, it really makes sense to put your solar somewhere else, whether it's on a head house or on a ground mount, and let the glazing do what the glazing is supposed to do. We can engineer, if you're growing lettuce, you need lower light intensity. And so it might be that one of these new glazings creates power and reduces the light intensity in just a way that it works great for lettuce. And if and when that happens, then that's something that we will definitely be doing. But if you're growing tomatoes and cucumbers, it might not be the case, or until solar gets way more efficient, it won't be the case. And in those situations, a ground mount next to the greenhouse or on the head house to the north of the greenhouse makes all kinds of sense. And that way you can keep the two systems separate and not affect your plants and still produce optimum power. The other thing is, depending on location, orientation of solar panels matters. Summer wants a steeper angle than the winter. And so oftentimes having a separate solar system means you have a more efficient solar system than relying on the existing roof pitch of the greenhouse, which may not be optimal for power generation in your location. But we do love the idea, and we have several farms right now that are putting in large. I just visited a farm in Montana, and it's a completely sealed greenhouse, which means it has heat pump, heat cool, and DHU, ETFE glazings, and they're putting in 7 acres of solar with microgrid, containerized battery storage to run that greenhouse. It's going to be really cool. They happen to have a lot of land, so 7 acres of solar panels is doable for them, which it isn't for most people. But that kind of gives you an idea of how much PV one needs to power a commercial greenhouse.
But I think we want to maybe clarify that was a sealed greenhouse, which is very energy intensive.
That's right.
Because you want to control the climate within a few degrees. We are designing energy efficient greenhouses that are specifically catered to being off the grid and having only sun available or electricity available if the sun is shining. So you can make the design of a greenhouse optimal for that. Particularly, all of the Caribbean islands is a good example where, certain climate conditions are there where we can make greenhouses that are specifically designed to use power only when the sun is shining, and even then very, very sparingly.
Okay, so just because we have 5 or 6 minutes left here, I wanted to go back to a couple questions that were asked during the webinar. From Lalo, how do you control nutrient feed with different species in a small area?
Well, I guess that depends. It's hard. It's easier if you have 3,000 square feet of lettuce, because it all needs the same thing. I don't know. You either create smaller circuits of water if you're trying to automate watering. A lot of growers will use a dosatron or 2 or 3. That's a mechanical pump that runs off water pressure. They're pretty affordable. And they will pump based on your water flow rate, whatever nutrient you have hooked into the dosatron. So you could switch nutrients from segment to segment, turn on a valve that waters a segment with a certain nutrient blend, and then turn that one off, swap nutrients. You could also hand water if it's small enough. You can mix up batches or whatever. Or if it's in soil, it's a little bit of a different thing where hopefully you just have really healthy soil, and then you can just water your plants. Small greenhouses are the hardest to compartmentalize.
And you mean by that a controller can take care of that, right?
Right.
Thank you, Josh. Next one is from Sandra. What are the most important considerations in attaching a greenhouse to a house with the objective of using the greenhouse to help heat the house?
I think we touched on this last time. And we have a kit house with attached greenhouse, and so we get to deal with this a fair amount. We've also connected a lot of greenhouses to houses and buildings. The greenhouse needs to be considered exterior space, and so the partition wall between the house and the greenhouse should be designed and built as an exterior wall, which means some sort of moisture barrier, weather resistant siding of some sort, and ideally something that you can completely close. So exterior windows and doors. And then what we do is we actually have our controller in the house, and we can control the windows. So if the house wants heat and the greenhouse has extra heat and it's not too humid or something, however you set it, the controller can open the windows and let the heat conduct into the house. Convect. The windows are up high, so it will take the heat out of the greenhouse into the house. You can also have fans that are in that wall between the greenhouse and the house, and they can run if it's a certain temperature in the greenhouse and the house is calling for heat. But we didn't design it that way because there's a noise associated with it. There could be dust or particulate associated with that, but there are ways to get that heat into the house. But I want to stress controls are important, because otherwise you have a new pet, or you're always babysitting. If you have to always be opening the window so that your greenhouse doesn't overheat, or that your house has heat, that means you can't leave the house, and it's a perpetual situation where it's hard to leave. And so figuring out a system in design where it can operate either without needing that or without you being there is a really good design choice.
Awesome. Last question from Ashton. Have you ever had a client do shrimp in one of your greenhouses, and what worked for them?
Marc, shrimp? We hear all kinds of things about seafood. Aquaponics is versatile. And so I know those systems can grow shrimp. Are there freshwater shrimp? I mean, saltwater species doesn't integrate, so if you just need sunlight and want to do pure aquaculture, that's a whole nother deal, but totally doable. And we'd love to play around with that. We've never done a pure aquaculture greenhouse. If they're freshwater shrimp, they poop just like anything else, and so their poop could potentially be used as a nutrient source for leafy greens, which would
I know it's a real thing. So I know people are doing it. So that's the question would be going to a company like Colorado Aquaponics. They know how to do this. This is not rocket science.
I think
and
that's
we just take a small monthly shipment of shrimp as part of our payment plan.
Okay, good.
I think that's perfect timing. We got to almost every single question. I think there was maybe one or two more, but all the questions that were asked live got answered. And I will hand over the finale to Haley.
Thank you everyone for coming to our second Q&A Ask an Expert webinar. If you would like any more information on any topic discussed, or you'd like to inquire about our various consulting packages for your specific greenhouse project, please email us at the email displayed, info@ceresgs.com. We offer consulting packages for all types of greenhouse projects, series or non-series builds, and can help you at every stage of your project. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.